Carrying on with our Faction Explained series, we're going to be taking a look at the Light and Dark factions today. If you haven't already seen, I have videos talking about the Shadow, Fortress, Abyss, and Forest heroes, and we'll later be talking about the Transcendence heroes. So if you haven't caught any of those, be sure to check out my channel and hit that subscribe button for more content. Either way, today we're going to be talking about the Light and Dark factions, which heroes are good, how you should build the heroes in those factions, and which ones you can choose to ignore. If you're new to the game, we can explain how these work in Idle Heroes and which ones should be considered as you move forward, and potentially even which ones you should build first and prioritize, and actually maybe some of them you don't even need to build as high as you think. So yeah, the Light and Dark faction is an interesting one, and we'll probably have a few talking points that we can go ahead and break down. So folks, let's get into it. So let's start by taking a look at the Dark faction. What's important about here is pretty much most of these heroes can be made to 6-star minus 2 of them. The 2 that can't be made to 6-star and therefore should be definitely used as food are Logan and Darkness Fenella. These pretty much exist to be used as heroes that you can make from 4-star up to 5-star and used for upgrading your Dark heroes. One thing you will find is that Light and Dark heroes will struggle to get hero copies. For the Light faction, there are also 2 heroes that fall into this category. That's going to be Fagin and Disciples. So yeah, both of these are just totally food and should be used for that reason. Now we move on to the hero that can be made to 6-star and no higher. For the Dark faction, that's going to be Dark Spirit. Do not take this hero any higher than 6-star because you will end up with a hero that is 9-star that you will have to regress, and you definitely shouldn't use as food. And you might not even be able to regress these heroes because they aren't able to be made to 10-star. That is something I have heard. I don't know if I can confirm that or deny it, but just be really careful. I wouldn't take Dark Spirit any higher than 6-star. The same absolutely goes for the Light equivalent, which is Divine Spirit. These 2 heroes are total traps and should be used as 6-star heroes to upgrade to 8, 9, and 10-star, and that is it for advancing your heroes. If we go back to the Dark faction, let's take a look at the actual heroes that can be made to 10-star. We're going to go from the oldest to the newest, so we'll start off with Dark Arthendol. Main thing about Dark Arthendol, she cannot be imprinted. She used to be a phenomenal hero back in the earlier days of the game. When she takes damage, she receives added attack and skill damage and also gains energy. That meant you could actually give her an active skill round 1 without giving her an energy artifact. All she had to do was get hit by opponents and then she would burst out an attack. This, before Unbending Will came out, was terrifying because it meant that you were able to pretty much decimate an entire team, because Dark Arthendol's active skill is able to hit all opponents. So built her for crit, she was able to just wipe out the whole opposing team. Now this doesn't work anymore, but with the correct lineup and abusing Dark Arthendol correctly, you can still clear CLN 20. In fact, CLN 20 in the earlier days in the Dark faction was the easiest CLN to clear because of Dark Arthendol, which might shock some of you, but genuinely this was one of the first CLN 20 clears we managed to figure out as a community, and it was all thanks to Dark Arthendol. That was before imprints came out. That was just with an E5 hero, which, you know, that was the good old days, right? Splendid artifacts didn't exist. You'd give her a normal Punisher of Immortal. It was pretty good. Now it's totally easy with a lot of these Dark heroes, which we will talk about. But yeah, it's a shame that she's no longer good because you can't imprint her. So sadly, she is just food. Although she can petrify, and her basic attack petrifies the front line. So maybe that has a usefulness, but generally you can comfortably use her as food these days. Sleepless is a really cool hero. He resurrects after he's dead, similar to Michelle, which we'll take a look at in the Light faction. And Sleepless is able to petrify opponents and deals marks to them, which cause them to take delayed damage. This is actually annoying if you're fighting Sleeplesses, but generally it's pretty unimpactful. He's not a very strong hero, cannot be imprinted, so can be used as food. And Desmog, another hero that used to be really strong in the earlier days of the game. You could run multiple Desmogs whenever he deals active skills, or whenever anyone in your team does an active skill. There's the little passive here. There it is. He gains energy. So before Energy Feed existed, thanks to heroes like Ignis or artifacts like an upgraded Demon Bell using the Almost Workshop, before any of that existed, Desmog was one of the few heroes that could gain energy. And he gets 30 energy whenever an ally does an active skill. So again, you just have to run people with Demon Bells with Desmog, and then he would just have whatever damage artifact he wanted. It could be an Antler's Cane, it could have been a Punisher of Immortal, and he was just racking up all this energy and was able to do a ton of damage. As well, he gained skill damage from this. And skill damage scales really nicely with damage over time, so you could actually run multiple Desmogs together, have tons of damage going off as they were gaining power from other people using their active skills, and it was a really powerful technique in PvE. Now that he can't be imprinted, and considering that the Dark faction has been massively power crept just like every other faction, Desmog is no longer impactful and can definitely be used as food. People will look at him fondly because he is a really cool hero. He probably has one of the coolest artworks of any hero in the game, but unfortunately he is pretty useless. And that's it. That's it for the non-imprintable ones. So now we go and look at the actually impactful Dark heroes that can be imprinted. And oh boy, it's a mixed bag. Amivor is cool in the fact that Amivor is just recently imprintable, one of the newer imprintable heroes. I think DH Games are rolling out some new imprints as well, but for now, Amivor is the newest addition to the Dark imprintable heroes, but he's also really old, not that great, doesn't have that much impact, and probably the only thing of note is his speed at 1232. He's very quick, but generally his attack is just superseded by other assassins. There are so many better assassins in the game, and you could say it's redeeming for him that he is an assassin, so he synergizes with Rogan, but he's hitting 2 enemies, he does additional damage based on max HP. He was one of the first heroes to have that ability, actually, and actually he does gain crit from doing an active skill as well and does more damage against priests. But all of this accumulates to a hero that is not that impactful. He's Petrify immune, but that's not really that good because there's not a lot of Petrify in the game, and when an ally releases an active skill, he too does gain energy, which is nice, similar to Desmog. So again, the same tactic of running multiple Amivors, all gaining energy and doing multiple active skills in PvE, used to work really well in the olden days for the same reason that Desmog did, because obviously more active skills means more damage, and very few heroes were able to compete with this, but nowadays it isn't as impactful. If you ever did want to build Desmog, Amivor is probably the better choice just in general for being an assassin and for being imprintable, but again, isn't a very impactful hero. You could potentially run an Amivor cheese team, but that wouldn't still not be that great. I'd love to try it, honestly. I'd love to see what it could do, but you know what? I don't think it's going to be... I don't think it's going to be anything I try anytime soon. If you do want to see that, let me know in the comment section down below. I'll try and get some Amivor copies and try a double Amivor Rogan team. Maybe that would be cool to try, but honestly, he's just not that great. Moving on, we have probably the most controversial hero that's ever been released in Idle Heroes, Mim. When Mim came out back in 2018, he was game-breaking. When a hero died on the battlefield, he dealt 200% of attack damage against all enemies for 2 rounds, and that's a damage over time. And what was nuts about this is there was no unbending will, there was no way to protect yourself against this. Healing was really going to struggle to out-heal this, and damage over time triggers the moment it happens, and then happens at the end of the round. So you wouldn't even have a chance to heal this. In many cases, as you will know if you've faced Mims in Tower of Oblivion, the moment someone dies, boom, Mims passive triggers, wipes out the whole team. When there's multiple Mims, that's lots and lots of damage over time coming through, and you just get totally punished. When Mim came out, the disgusting things that you have faced in Tower of Oblivion against Mim waves, if you haven't, you've got all that to come. Trust me, it's horrible. But when you have to face that, you'll realize that Mim's passive is nuts, and it was just as powerful when it came out as it is now in the Tower of Oblivion. However, it's not good in modern-day PvE because we have so many ways to reduce this damage, whether it's through damage reduction, whether it's through Augustus Magic Ball, or just whether it's due to healing, right? Shields plus healing that we get now in the game from heroes like Fiona, from Mystic Fairy Freya, from Vesa. They just eat through this, and Mim just cannot do enough damage. 200% is not a lot. If Mim was to be released nowadays, this would probably say 800%, and it might be just then so oppressive that, yeah, it could probably creep into the meta, but people used to use multiple Mims in Interdimensional Arena as a cheese team. You could run heroes that you intend to die, like Destroyer or Emily, that when they get to low health or when they die will buff the team, making the Mims stronger, so this 200% of attack is much higher, but generally Mim's cheesiness is long gone and is not used in the game. However, with the IHXC, you'll find that Mim will have a place in that meta due to how good this passive is, and for that reason we had to limit people to using one of a hero because multiple Mims is exploitative, and we were like, no, just run one. But nowadays in modern Idle Heroes, it's definitely not a good hero to run. Really cool though. He's got some cool abilities, like for his active skill, for example, it will reduce the armor of a frontline enemy and petrifies them for 2 rounds. If they're in the back line, it's going to reduce their attack and their speed. So one little trick you can do if you're going to use an Eloise to fight Mims, you can stick her on the back line in slot 3. Run no one else, because the moment you run other heroes, they die and trigger this, so you don't want that. But you can run an Eloise and you can give her Attribute Reduction Purify and she'll remove that attack reduction, and then you should be able to come out and deal with the Mims. Don't put her in the front line, you will get petrified. So actually positioning your heroes is something you need to know about Mim, because his active skill does different things depending on where you are. Besides that though, he's not that impactful. He does have some damage reduction, some control immunity, but overall he's not that great. Basic attack does steal energy though, that's nice, but that's against a frontline opponent. But still, he's a cool hero. I like Mim, but he's not used anymore, and for one of the imprintable heroes, he is arguably the worst in the game. Many people would say that, and I think I'm inclined to agree. Let's move on to the actually good Dark Heroes. So, these 6 heroes we're about to take a look at are probably... Oh, there's so much to say. So we'll start off with Aspen. Aspen is really interesting. So Aspen can do Dark Seal End. In fact, he's probably the best to do Dark Seal End. But why on earth would you build an Aspen first? Now, that's a very interesting question to ask, because there's one reason and only one reason you would build Aspen as your primary Dark Hero, and that's because you want to build Lord of Fear Aspen as your primary Transcendence hero. And that's a crazy technique. I know people have done it, and people have had a fun time doing it, but it is by no means the optimal thing to do for many accounts, and you probably need to spend a decent amount of money to make it viable. Nonetheless, Lord of Fear Aspen is an incredible Transcendence hero who we'll talk about when we cover our Transcendence heroes, but oh boy, if you can get your hands on him, he's going to be very, very fun to try. And there's actually other Dark Heroes as well that have Transcendence forms, which we'll take a look at later. Primarily Mockman will be one to consider. But anyway, back to the Dark faction. Aspen is great. So Aspen's able to horrify opponents, which means they can only do active skills. So if they don't have enough energy, they do nothing. So it's a nice passive CC. Also, if an enemy is below 35% of HP, he deals extra damage to them and heals himself based on the damage dealt. So this is a really strong ability. Used to be used in PvE. Aspen used to be the most powerful hero in PvE against enemies who are below 35%. Obviously, that's totally changed now thanks to the release of Drake and other things that you can use to exploit broken spaces, and the fact that power creep now has become so impactful in the game that you no longer have to run heroes like this to just be able to blow out broken spaces. It's just super easy. So yeah, he can execute enemies though. That's the cool thing. When they're below a certain amount, that extra damage he does really will just finish them off and deal a nice extra chunk of damage. He's got armor break, crit attack, and HP, which is decent. His basic attack also has that extra damage when they're below 35%, also has a chance to horrify, so he's horrifying with basics and actives, and his passive is really neat. It's increasing his attack and his crit damage, so he's dealing way, way, way more damage, and he gains Soul Shelter, which gives him control immunity and damage reduction, and that stacks up to 5 layers. And 20% of control immunity eventually will get him to a point with 5 layers where he's at 100% control immunity, so he cannot be CC'd, which can be very irritating to fight. And 6% stacked 5 times is 30% damage reduction he's going to get, which is really nice when you combine that with other damage reduction artifacts to make him a very tanky hero. That takes some time, but if you can pull it off, you end up with a very, very tanky, sustainy Aspen, which is a really fun hero to try in the early game, but obviously getting your hands on Aspen copies is difficult. For that reason, I would say if you want to try it, he is one of the better warriors in the game, and probably one of the better early E5s you could build. You could actually put him up there as one of the best first E5s, but for the reason that he's a Dark hero, and arguably not the best choice for your first Dark hero, he loses points. But on a complete flat, like if this was in any other faction, like if he was a Shadow hero, for example, he would be probably rivaling Eloise as a first E5. I think Eloise still pinches it based on just how good her tenants are, but you know what? You have to say it to him. It would be a lie if I said to you that he wasn't good as a first E5. He's definitely up there with the best of them, just because of how reliably he can clear Seal Land, he can do plenty of game modes, deal a ton of damage. Really cool hero. Totally underrated, I think. I think Aspen gets the seal of probably the most underrated hero in the game. And that's a bold statement for me to say, but hands down, Aspen is really cool. Should you be building him? No. That's the problem, right? There is no optimal path where I could think of you building an Aspen unless you were going for Lord of Fear Aspen, and even that's not optimal. So yeah, if you want to be gnarly though, an Aspen first E5 account would be fun. I might actually try that. If we do at some point a series where I'm bored and I'm like, yo, I want to try something stupid, Aspen as a first E5 might be an option for that. You know what? I'm now talking myself into it. I think that's pretty cool. And you might be thinking, why is Aspen not the best optimal first E5? Well, it comes down to the next three heroes we're going to take a look at. Ammon Raw, Carrie, and Drake. I think we'll start with Drake, as Drake is probably the most iconic of all of them, and I have said in videos before that he is one of my favorite heroes in the game, and people often get confused when I say this. When I rank Drake highly, people go ahead and turbo out an E5. Unfortunately, that is a mistake. You shouldn't be building Drake to E5 early on, because all you need from Drake is this final passive. Shadow Law. It provides defense down at the start of a fight and at the end of a round to the enemy with the lowest HP. This is nuts. It will strip away all of their armor, all of their damage reduction, all of their all damage reduction, all their block, and all their dodge. All the things that make opponents really difficult to kill. Drake goes, nope, and you just strip that back and you deal way more damage to them. Removing armor, damage reduction, and all damage reduction, plus block and dodge, basically makes your heroes fundamentally deal a catastrophically higher amount of damage than they would without defense down. That is why Drake is compulsory in broken spaces, because it just makes your team so much more powerful. And as a humble 9-star, if you can keep him alive and put out that debuff, everything he does is phenomenal. Add to that his active skill, which puts out black hole marks. When it detonates, it deals damage based on the damage the enemy already took. So it's a nice end of round mark that can actually be really annoying because it gets past Unbending Will because it is a mark. And that's not fun, right? That's really not fun. Unbending Will cannot protect you against marks. So potentially you can get assassinated by a black hole mark in PvP. So Drake finds a spot there. The biggest thing that Drake gets used for that a lot of people don't understand is that Drake targets the enemy with the lowest HP with this defense down. That synergizes with Sword Flash. If you're using a Sword Flash and you want to get the most out of her, you need to be using a Drake, because Sword Flash needs to ensure that she gets a kill to get impeccable flow, which is a passive that allows her to deal a very, very powerful active skill that makes her target all enemies and heal. By targeting all enemies, Sword Flash can potentially wipe out waves in the Void Vortex or pretty much any game mode where you need Sword Flash to get the kill, and it's really good against teams with 6 opponents. To ensure that, though, you need a Drake to debuff the enemy with the lowest HP so that there is a higher chance that Sword Flash gets that kill round 1. Add to that the fact that Drake is an assassin, so is Sword Flash. You can then synergize in heroes like Rogan, and before you know it, thanks to Rogan's crazy passive, which we talked about in the last video when we were talking about forest heroes, you'll find that Drake plus Rogan plus Sword Flash is one of the most potent combos in the game if you can pull it off correctly. We'll talk more about Sword Flash in our Transcendence episode and why she's actually a very difficult hero to run, and that a lot of you shouldn't be trying to build Sword Flash as a first E5, or at least a first Transcendence E5 for that matter. That said, though, Drake is good, and the only reason I would take him to E5 is to use him with a Sword Flash. On every other account, a 9-star Drake is just enough. Defense down will do its job. If you find that he's dying, give him some ways of protecting him with shields and healing, and even if that's not enough, then you might want to consider increasing his level. Now, why do we stop Drake at 9-star and take him no further? Well, it's because there's other dark heroes I would like to invest in, primarily Carrie and Ammon Raw. Carrie and Ammon Raw are lucky in that they both are the final tenants for probably the most iconic hero for early accounts, Eloise. And you can choose between Carrie and Ammon Raw. Now, Carrie, in my opinion, always is the primary choice because Carrie is a ranger, so benefits from the same guild tech, and Carrie is able to steal energy from opponents. And stealing energy with her devouring mark is exceptionally powerful because, well, I don't really know how to say it other than the fact that if an opponent can't do an active skill, they're pretty much screwed. Because active skills are what makes or breaks a hero, that or their passives. But passives are buffing other heroes normally to allow them, when they do their active skills, to ruin you. One of the most iconic active skills that you'll be facing against the game itself is Garuda's active skill, which tears you a new one in pretty much every game mode, whether it's Realms Gate, Void Vortex, whatever happens that you fight that has a Garuda. Heck, she appears in the Tower of Dreams as well. It's not fun. Garuda is a very strong hero for some reason when the computer uses her. So how on earth do we get around this? Well, you run a Carrie to steal energy from the Garuda so she never gets active skills. First of all, Carrie's basic attack is just going to steal energy, so can just go yoink against a random opponent. That's very, very nice. However, her active skill is going to put out a mark which triggers when the opponent has 100 energy or more and steals all that energy and then deals damage to them based on every point of energy taken. So you can really punish opponents for having energy by hitting them with this mark. For that reason, when you're facing carries, Mark Purify is a nice way to remove this mark, because sometimes it just sits there waiting for you to do a basic attack, and then you go into the next round, you do a basic attack, take your energy to 100, and then you lose it all, you die, right? Because it goes straight through Unbending Will. Unfun, not fun content at all. Also, Carrie on her own, just for the fact that she energy steals, would be annoyingly overpowered, but then the devs were like, oh, I know what we'll do. We'll give her the ability to resurrect, and it's stupid. She deals damage when she's dead, but after she's got 4 layers of spirit power, she comes back with 100% of her health and 100 energy for some crazy reason, so she gets an active skill the round she comes back, which means she puts out more devouring marks. It's broken. And you might be thinking, holy crap, a hero that resurrects? I assume that's just one time. Nope. So you can keep resurrecting her over and over again, provided she keeps getting these spirit power layers, which she gets, by the way, when any hero on the battlefield dies, which is stupid. And she gets 1 layer around. So she's basically racking up these spirit layers, will potentially come back really quickly if a bunch of other heroes die, and you can run multiple carries, meaning when they die, they allow the other carries to come back, and it can cause perpetual locks where carries keep resurrecting, and you can never kill the opposing team. It's disgusting to face. It was the meta back in the 2020 meta of PvP, and we found that carries were pretty much unbeatable. And another thing that makes her really, really annoying is there's a 40% chance for her to hide in the void and dodge. She dodges, which means your attack could just totally whiff and do no damage to her whatsoever, which makes it even harder to kill her, which then causes it to stall out even more, allowing other carries to resurrect. Carrie is bustedly good, and you should definitely be using her alongside an Eloise, because the energy steal, plus the dodge, plus the fact she comes back, and there's more energy steal if you do that, and the basic attack energy steals, she's just a stupidly potent hero that makes for a very good early hero alongside an Eloise, and is one of the most overpowered heroes in the game. She dropped off in recent years thanks to the fact that PvP power creep has been a thing. Transcendence heroes just laugh at Carrie because she's too slow, but trust me, if the meta was at a point where there was no Transcendence heroes and outspeeding Carrie was something a lot of heroes struggled to do, you would find Carrie being the most difficult hero to face in the game. And at a speed of 12-18, she pretty much redefined the game when she came out and said, nah, if you don't have more speed than me, you suck, because you're not getting an active skill. And for that reason, Carrie is bonkers. Moving on to Ammon Raw, we have probably one of the most permanently good heroes in the game. Ever since her release, Ammon Raw has always found a use in the meta. For many reasons, she redefined the way disruption works in this game. She starts off pretty standard with what is an active skill that can petrify targets on the front line, but then she also has Guardian Shadow, which is a shield ability that gets hit and then heals you instead of damaging you with opposing attacks. So if an attack would hit you for 800% of damage, instead it heals you for 800% of damage, which is nuts, because it's not only damage mitigation, it's healing, which is a crazy ability and transforms your win rate in games, because it pretty much says, aha, you take no damage and heal. Very strong. Add to that the fact that she reduces the time she's CC'd by 1, which is very nice. So it's not quite pure crowd control, but it's still very difficult to lock her down. And on top of that, she releases what's called, if I can find it, the Healing Curse, which, there it is. And Healing Curse is one of the most annoying abilities in the game. It is a mark that deals not healing, which is what's happening to your team. It does the opposite. If an enemy heals, and they're healing cursed, all the healing they would receive becomes damage instead. And because it's a mark, it goes through Unbending Will. That's why you may randomly see sword flashes fall over when they do an active skill against an Ammon Raw. That is because the sword flash will heal themselves based on the damage they do, which normally in sword flash's case is more than sword flash's health, and that results in a healing curse basically destroying sword flash on the spot, because all the healing she would get turns into damage. Unbending Will cannot stop it, and you result in an immediately dead sword flash. Ammon Raw is busted thanks to her Healing Curse ability. It just destroys teams and is very strong. When you imprint her, you get even more Healing Curses. You can do it to 3 random enemies when she's Void 3, so pretty much half the team get Healing Cursed. Very substantial ability, and it makes her a very good choice if you want more survivability for your team, not only because of the bubbles, but because you just shut down opposing sustain heroes like Garuda or like opposing sword flashes in PvP, and they just end up hurting themselves and getting killed, and it makes them a lot more easier to deal with. For that reason, Ammon Raw gets a very solid place on Realmsgate teams, not only for the fact that she can just give your normal team for Realmsgate a good chance at winning, but as well against puppets. If you run multiple Ammon Raws with a lot of Demon Bells, you can have continuous energy feed where the Ammon Raws keep doing active skills over and over again, putting out more Guardian Shadow bubbles, which results in so many layers that you literally cannot die to the puppets because you have so many bubbles just taking all the hits. They're never ever going to get through them. So you just live and live and live and live. It can take those puppets way into like rounds beyond round 15 to a point where your attack stacks so high that you can then just kill the puppet outright. Very, very, very strong ability. Definitely recommend you try 10-star and E5 Ammon Raws in the Realmsgate for that reason. You will need to get them to Void 3 to have a good amount of Healing Curse, and Void 4 if you want to get increased amounts of Guardian Shadow. That's my recommendation, getting yourself an E5 with Void 4 alongside some 10 stars, which just gives you an insane amount of Guardian Shadow so you cannot be killed. And then you just ruin against dummies that would otherwise beat your entire team because you take no damage. It's very, very good, and I love Ammon Ra for that reason. And there you have probably the 3 most iconic Dark Heroes in the game: Drake, Carrie, and Ammon Ra. All of them are useful, and they all come into play on different lineups and different teams. Carrie would be my primary choice for early accounts to build as your first E5 in the Dark faction, because she's able to be a really good tenant for Eloise. Ammon Ra comes into play with her Guardian Shadow, which is really, really useful in the Dark Seal Land. Healing Curse is very nice, and I think alongside a Carrie, Ammon Ra, and the two of them can really help you in the Dark Seal Land. Drake is a 9-star, can pretty much clean up the deal with the defense down, and if you are still struggling against Dark Seal Land at that point and you can't beat Seal Land 20, you probably are lacking imprints or doing something wrong, because honestly these 3 heroes are so good. And now we move on to the last 2 Dark Hero releases, which are just weird. So we'll go on to Forcus. I'll say it straight up about Forcus. Forcus is really good, but came too late. Forcus was released after Transcendence heroes had already well established themselves into the game. If he didn't come out then, and was much earlier, he'd have found himself in PvP tearing people to pieces. The main reason is his Curse of Decay, which triggers when opponents receive an attribute buff. You might remember there's heroes like Seahu and Rogan and plenty of other heroes out there that buff themselves that just give attribute bonuses to themselves or the team. Curse of Decay says, oh, nah, I'm just going to kill you. And it deals 1500% of attack damage. That's a mark, so it goes for Unbending Will, and you take a ton of damage from Forcus' active skill. And it's so good. The active skill, first of all, just straight up removes an attribute buff, and it offsets that attribute bonus that you get. And yeah, it's just nice. So it's debuffing opponents, or at least removing the buffs they give themselves, and dealing a ton of damage to them. That alone is a phenomenal active skill. He comes in at 1238, which makes him one of the fastest, if not the fastest hero in the game that is non-transcended, and his other abilities are great. His passives, HP, attack, skill, damage, control immunity, which is very nice, and speed. We move on to his. His basic attack is going to deal damage to the enemy with the highest attack and reduce their all damage dealt for 3 rounds, so a nice debuff on the opponent. And then finally, this passive, which is just laughably funny. When a round ends, he's going to deal damage to all enemies equal to 8% of their max HP, and then deals soul corruption to them, which means they cannot restore that HP back. So it's like, no, you are not healing this, my friend. You are losing 8% of your HP for the next 6 rounds. Good luck dealing with that one, my guy. And it's a skill effect, so it can't be removed. There's no skill effect, Purify. So you'll find that this is a very fun ability. Forcus comes into play mainly nowadays in the Star Expedition to remove buffs from opponents, which is pretty useful, and he occasionally pops his head into PvP on anti-meta teams that want to counter Rogans and Seahus. Apart from that, though, Forcus doesn't really see much play. He's not a necessary build for most accounts, and you won't actually feel any negative impact not building him. But he's fun. I think that's the important thing, right? There's so many other Dark Heroes to prioritize. He's kind of in the same situation of Aspen, where he's a cool hero. You're just going to be hard-pressed finding a reason to build him. And then we move on to, finally, Mockman. Mockman is a pretty mediocre hero. Again, good hero, bad time of release. There's a lot wrong with Mockman, which I've already explained in a previous video. But generally, if you're building Mockman, the reason is because you need to use him to get to Transcendence Mockman. His ability to counterattack and all the things he does are just not as good as Eloise, and given the fact that the other Dark Heroes in the game are more impactful than Mockman, I would really struggle to recommend building him. That said, though, do save your copies for when you finally do want to build a Transcendence Mockman, because he's really, really good. So, yeah. Between all the Dark Heroes, the main ones you want to prioritize are Drake, Carrie, and Ammon Raw. The rest of them are good fun. Mim sucks, Amivor sucks, Mockman should only be built for Transcendence, and Forcus is so situational, but god is he fun. And Aspen, honestly, the most underrated hero in the Light and Dark factions, period. And that's us done with the Dark Heroes. Hopefully that's given you a good amount of coverage for them. If you want recommendations on how to build some of these heroes, active skills from Ammon Raw are brilliant because it puts up her Guardian Shadow, so any energy artifact on her is great. Carrie, there's so many versatile ways you can build her because her kit is just so good. Her abilities on their own are fantastic. You could build her quickly if you want to snipe with an early basic to steal energy, so you could give her a speed artifact. You could just give her an energy artifact and just round one devouring mark opponents. That's also really good. And then for Drake, you just want to keep him alive, really, so that his defense down comes into play. If you want to get those black hole marks off, you can build him quickly with a speed stone and a speed artifact, but generally HP or HP crit, and then just give him something that's going to allow him to stay alive like a golden crown is oftentimes just good enough, because Drake, given the fact that he can dodge with this passive here with a 60% chance, and that increases as you imprint him, dodge plus some form of defensive artifact should hopefully allow Drake to stick around, and keeping him alive is pretty much the key element with him, because defense down just does so much work, and he can be CC'd and this still goes off. It is literally just a start of round passive, and for that reason, yeah, defensive artifacts for Drake, in my opinion. You could also run these heroes with energy feed. That's totally doable, like with Demon Bells and stuff, but that's more nuanced if you know what you're doing there. And actually, I would still arguably run Crown on Drake and just allow energy feed to come from heroes like Rogan with Demon Bells. So you don't necessarily need to prioritize Drake as an energy feeder with a Demon Bell, although his speed is potentially very high at 1232, so there are ways to make him faster than a Sword Flash if that was your strategy. Anyway, enough about energy feed right now. Let's move on to the Light faction. So the Light faction is pretty standard. We've already covered the 6 stars and stuff. Let's go on to the 10 stars real quick, because the Light faction is probably going to be one of the quickest coverages we've got, because the Light faction is probably the least impactful in the entire game. I hate the Light faction. So we have Gurk. Gurk is able to buff himself and allow holy damage to come to your team, which is nice. And you know what? He's fun, right? That's it. That's it. He's a fun hero. And he's going to increase your team's holy damage by 25%. That's it with his active skill. This used to be really good in PvE. Used to be, being the key term. He sucks, don't build him. Next we have Asmodel. Wow, such an annoying hero to fight. Asmodel has what's called a crit mark. That's the only thing that makes this version of Asmodel good. Everything else he does doesn't matter. Everything is just crit mark, crit mark, deals crit mark, more crit marks, right? If you don't know what crit marks are, basically, if you take a critical hit, the mark triggers and deals damage. But that's really good against Unbending Will, because it's going to allow you to basically kill opponents through Unbending Will. It's very annoying if you're facing Asmodels, because it means they're just going to tear through your heroes regardless if they have Unbending Will, so be afraid of Asmodels, especially in Aspen Dungeon and the Tower. That's where Asmodels will shine. Should you run your own Asmodel? No. Moving on, we have Michelle. Oh boy, Michelle's actually kind of cool. So she's able to CC with her active skill, she does burn with her active skill, and she has a really good amount of control immunity, 100%, so she can't get CC'd, and she's able to resurrect. On the next round after dying, she comes back with a ton of energy, and that's pretty nice. So when she dies, even at 5-star she resurrects, but she only has 60% of HP, and she comes back, and she just takes a few more hits on your behalf, so that's really nice. So you can run like 5 Michelles and then your main E5 for Light Seal Land, and then the Michelles will die, they'll come back, so you just get loads more hits that you can take. As well, if you give them all energy, they have a 35% chance to stun, even as a 5-star, so you get some decent stun chances coming off there, which can potentially buy you some rounds for your hero to deal decent damage. But that's it. That's what makes Michelle good. You basically keep around 5-star copies of her, get that resurrection and it comes in. You can also run a ton of her in Guild Wars, pretty much just to sit around and just be heroes to fight on your behalf alongside more powerful heroes. And that's us done with the non-imprintable. That's actually a lie. Michelle is oh my god. Michelle! Why is Michelle imprintable? I don't know. It's dumb. She's not even an elite light hero. She's one of the few, if the only, non-elite hero that can be imprinted. I don't know why they put imprints on her. Anyway, let's move on to the top row, which is where the heroes actually begin to get interesting, and say no more about Michelle and the ones on the bottom. And you know what? I'll be blunt. The Light faction has one purpose in the game, and that's Seal Land. You need eventually to build an E5 in the light faction for the glory challenge so that you can come in here and get your reward down there, get yourself a 9-star light puppet, and then happy days, good for you. However, if you do want to go ahead and do that, you're going to need someone that can clear light seal land. Fortunately, people have managed to solve ways of doing light seal land with Faithblade. I did that. Figured that one out. He's very, very cool. You've got yourselves an Ada. Ada can clear light seal land as well. You've got Tara. Tara can do it. Russell can do it. He's the most easiest one to do it with, to be fair. So if you want a reliable way, it's Russell. And funnily enough, so can Eos. I've done that on the channel as well. So pretty much, this is the rule for the light faction. Just collect them. Just collect light heroes. Don't build one. Just collect them. And eventually you'll have 9 copies of Eos, Russell, Tara, Ada, or Faithblade. Build one of them to E5, get them to do the seal land by researching on the Discords or through the community the ways that they can do their seal land, and once that's done, regress them. No more light hero for you because they're all crap. The only reason you would ever want to go ahead and build a light hero outside of doing their own seal land is to go to the Celestial Island, into the Cloud Island, and then take a look at Eos, who's a Transcendence hero, believe it or not. You can get a Transcendent Eos, and it's to build Russell to be a tenant. Oh yeah, that's it. Literally, Russell is the only useful light hero as a tenant for that reason. Every other hero just doesn't use light heroes. It's as if DH Games knew the light faction sucks and didn't want to force you to build them. Actually, I take that back. If you need to build an Asmodel the Dauntless for whatever reason, he needs Andrea, Russell. Oh, but then he's instantly like, nah, I'll take Halora instead. I'll take Saja. You know what? Yeah, it's Andrea and Russell at that point, maybe. Assuming you don't have Jara or Eos' Transcendent heroes to use on him. Asmodel the Dauntless is actually pretty good in Void campaign, so he's got that going for him at least. And I'm just going to quickly idle Master so I get all my things through. Very, very nice. Oh, look, I leveled up. 2 to 8. Anyway, let's get back to the light faction, shall we? So, talking about this, you need to do Seal Land 20 with a light hero and regress them. Russell is the most reliable and the easiest for you folks at home. Build a Russell, give him an energy artifact, he'll go shkabam, or at least he'll put himself into the air, because that's how his active skill works, and then eventually does an active skill where he goes shabam, and then deals a ton of damage to opponents. He then deals arrows to finish off the other opponents. He's able to dazzle people, which is really annoying ability. It means your effects just hit random enemies, which can actually be far more potent than it seems, because it just basically renders a lot of heroes useless. And for that reason, Russell's great. He's probably the best light hero you can go with. If you need support, that's where Andrea comes into play. Andrea is probably one of the most reliable healers in the game, has damage reduction, holy damage for your team. Really, really cool hero. But that's it. It's just a cool support hero. You don't necessarily need to build Andrea. I tried Andrea out, but then I just saw myself gravitating to other support heroes, like the Dark Faction, for example. We already talked about them. Disruption is just better, so Carrie and Ammon Raw jump out for that. We've got Tix, who has crazy attack steal, which is just better. And then, surprisingly, Olivia is just hands down one of the best support heroes in the game. And in any situation where I would want to run Andrea, I would rather just get Shrink and Fairy's Guard from an Olivia, and therefore Andrea just doesn't make the cut. She's like a worse version of Olivia, and I just can't justify it for that reason, because a little bit of holy damage bonus is just not as impactful as Shrink is for your team. Tussalago is awful. Don't build Tussalago. Done. Right? Not going any more about that. I'm not even going to indulge you with what Tussalago does. Tussalago is just bad. So, yeah, don't build Tussalago. And let's talk about the ones that can clear their seal lands. We've been a little bit harsh on the light faction, but rightly so. So, Ada. What does Ada do? Ada's really fast. Ada does end of round damage and reduces the heal effect of opponents, and then heals herself at the end of rounds. That's great. She also does an active skill that punishes opponents for using their active skill themselves by allowing them to take damage, which is very, very nice. You then have some holy damage, HP, damage reduction, and speed on her, and her basic attack targets the enemy with the highest HP and deals extra damage based on their max HP, and then heals herself as well. So she's pretty much a hero that's just going to have very good sustain and very oppressive damage. When Ada came out, she was very difficult to deal with, because she was a hero that made you take damage if you did active skills, which meant if your team had an Ada and your opponent didn't, you're just naturally punishing your opponent for playing the game, and therefore it was difficult to recover from basically facing an Ada if you didn't have one, because your team was just going to naturally take more damage, and therefore you would just lose on attrition. So it's a big shame that Ada came out and messed the meta up that way, because then it just resulted in everyone having to run an Ada on their team to counter other Adas, and it was very, very boring. But eventually Ada got power crept, and things are just back to being nice. Ada's still very cool, though, a very interesting hero, to say the least, and she can do well with good sustain builds. You might find if you need to get her to do Seal Land, you might need to be a little more aggressive, but there's plenty of different clears out there using Ada's, but reliably, you're going to need a Void 4. So if you are trying to do a light Seal Land, I would say delay as much as possible building your light hero, obviously until you have those 9 copies. I wouldn't recommend going for any chests, and obviously have Void 4, established a monster, have plenty of stuff out there that allows you to able to do Seal Land 20 easily. You have Tara, another hero that came out, which was basically good for a tiny bit. He has the Seal of Light, which pretty much shuts down an opponent's passive skills. Really nice, but it takes a while to establish itself, and Control Purify just removes it. So it's not as good as it seems, because it's funny, because Power of Light is a skill effect, but then Seal of Light, which is the thing that shuts you down, is a control effect. So you can't remove the seals of light that are coming in, but then once you are sealed, you can just get rid of it with a control effect. So it's not as good as it seems on paper. His active skill is okay. He buffs his own holy damage, deals some decent damage to your team. His attacks can hit multiple opponents, which is pretty good. So you can see when he releases an active skill or basic attack, he then deals armor ignoring damage against all enemies. So he's just doing consistent nasty damage. Also, his amount of holy damage is crazy. He's got a 70% buff here. So Tara as a damage dealer is very, very good and can do Light Seal Land for that reason. But he's a warrior. It's difficult to justify building him, and ultimately you can do better than Tara. And yeah, Russell's the hero I would go for if you really had to. Faithblade is an interesting one, my favorite light hero in the game. His active skill is really nice. It has a chance to stun enemies with HP that is no less than himself, so that goes off max HP. It's very, very nice. And also, a funny thing is it deals armor-ignoring damage, which is great because it just tears through them, equal to 20% of the target's lost HP. And then when enemies die, he gains energy. So he can continuously do active skills, which can be disgustingly oppressive, and that's how I was able to beat Seal Land 20. The idea is that he kills 2 of the guys, gets an active back, kills 2 of the guys, gets an active back, then uses that active to punch through the boss. It's very aggressive because he's a very squishy hero, but you should be able to wipe Seal Land 20 with a Faithblade if you build him right, but you have to know what you're doing. Faithblade has to get the kills, he needs to be Void 4, you need to have Star Spawns and things to allow him to be buffed up, so it's not something you can do straight away, but Faithblade is able to do it too. And then we have Eos. Eos is able to do Seal Land. You need to build her either with an aggressive build, crit attack. Some people would recommend using Augustus Magic Ball or Golden Crown and go with a defensive Eos. So there's 2 different strats for doing Seal Land 20 with her. Either just to survive and out-sustain them and out-damage them, or do so much damage that the opponents just drop before they get to do anything. She's an interesting hero that does burn and plenty of other abilities that just stack up to deal a ton of damage. You've got holy damage buffs coming in here. She's got some decent tankiness from damage reduction. Her basic attack is going to target 3 enemies, reduce their precision, and reduces their attack, so you get some survivability. And then when an ally releases an active skill, she's going to gain a layer of Shining Light, which stacks up to 12 layers and increases her own holy damage for 4 rounds. And yeah, it's just a pretty cool ability. There's lots of burn that comes out here as well, and she can dazzle opponents and she can taunt opponents, so there's tons of stuff she's doing. It results in a very long hero when it comes to her skills, but ultimately she's just not that impactful, really. It's a shame. For a hero that does so much, she does so little. So yeah, that's Eos, and that's the Light faction. Probably one of the most disappointing factions in the game. No one here is necessary, and that's the problem with the Light faction. You can read them and go, these are cool, but for everything in the game, there is no part of the game where you need a light hero except for Light Seal Land. And that leaves us on an interesting point with, should you build a light hero? Not straight away, just wait. It's really hard to get light food, so again, just wait. Getting light hero copies is difficult, but you should be prioritizing dark heroes. So if you are finding yourself getting what is the Glory Hero Epic Selection chests, which I have right here, so this can include any hero in the game, you should be prioritizing dark hero copies from this. And as well, these light and dark selection chests, you should be prioritizing dark heroes, because dark heroes are just that much better than light heroes. Eventually, you will get 9 copies of one of the heroes that can do their Seal Land in the Light faction, and that's when you build one to E5, and then do that, and you're done. All in all, interesting faction, not that impactful. If you are going to try and fight Light Seal Land at 21+, Andrea can help for the support. But that's about it. Everybody else doesn't really do much. it really is just Andrea that comes into play. The key heroes in that would either be Transcendence Eos, who deals a ton of damage, or Asmodel the Dauntless, who surprisingly as well deals a ton of damage, but as primarily a damage dealer, Asmodel the Dauntless struggles to be a immediate pick for accounts. Very fun though, and quite good at void campaigns, so his stock is increasing. He is becoming a more reliable hero for that reason, but originally he was voted the worst Transcendence hero in the game, but then this guy came out, and Star Alchemist Holmes Young is giving Asmodel a run for his money, and considering how reliable Asmodel the Dauntless is at void campaign, it may be soon that he is not as bad as people made him out to be. But more on that later when we talk about Transcendence heroes, and hopefully you've learned a little bit about the light and dark factions. If you want to catch more videos like this, hit that subscribe button. If you have any questions about these heroes, let me know in the comment section down below, and hopefully that was a decent crash course on the light and dark heroes. Until next time, folks, thank you for tuning in. I'll see you in the next one, and happy idling.